Gibraltar has always been built on hard work, resilience, and entrepreneurship. From family-run businesses to modern startups, local entrepreneurs continue to shape the Rock's economy and community. Behind every successful business is a personal story of sacrifice, determination, risk, and passion. Talking Business explores the people behind the businesses and the journeys that brought them to success. Today on Talking Business, I'm going to have a conversation with a young entrepreneur, 15 plus years in consultancy work and a father of 5, James Brenig. James, thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
You've been consulting for 15 years. You've been involved in a lot of different ventures. You've built some ventures yourself. Tell me what your career span looks like.
So let's start from the beginning. I think it's always interesting to hear the sort of, let's call it the origin story. So I started, my first job actually was working as answering the phones in a phone rental company, actually in Israel, for the equivalent of today £4 an hour or something like that, which was very exciting at the time. And it really taught me a lot, because the first thing I learned there was, I was there for a couple of weeks and I started noticing problems around the business. And I mentioned to a friend of mine, I've got, there's this problem, there's that problem. He said, well, why don't you do something about it? So I said, okay, that's interesting. So I wrote down a list of, I think it was 17 problems with the solutions, my solutions to it anyways. And then I went to my boss and I said to him, I've got these list of problems in your company, but I've also got some solutions for it. And he was obviously very happy with that. And so he promoted me in title, didn't get a pay rise yet, but over time,
still on £4.
Still on £4. I think I eventually went up to £5 an hour at some point. But that was sort of, it progressed from there, and it opened up some more doors for me. But I learned a very powerful lesson, which is you can either complain about something or you can actually get on and find the solution. And usually when you find the solutions, that's where the money is as well. I then moved to, I was in Israel at the time. I moved back to London, where I was born, and I started working in a construction company as the office manager. And one of the things that I sort of put as one of my terms of working there was that I have the ability to be able to go on site whenever I want, as long as I finish my work in the office, that I have the ability to go on site whenever I want and ask as many questions as I like. I'm very interested in construction, in property. I later started my own property company here in Gibraltar. But it was very much, I'm allowed to go on site and ask whatever questions I want, so I can learn, not just be there and do some work and get paid. I actually want to learn something.
Yes.
And so fast forward maybe 5 years later, in 2015, I opened my Phoenix Capital, which is my property investment development company here in Gibraltar. All that I'd learned there became incredibly helpful, incredibly useful.
Yes.
So that was something which was really, it was taking something which I'm anyways doing the job, but let's work out how do I learn on the job as well.
Yeah.
And something that even within Phoenix Capital, whenever I employ architects, engineers, whatever it might be, I always say I'm going to be really annoying and I'm going to ask you a bunch of different questions about how things work, because I'd really like to understand what you're doing. I'm never going to be an engineer, I'm not going to be an architect, but I'd like to really understand the sort of principles behind why something does or doesn't work, so I can come up with my own solutions as well.
James, tell me a little bit about the expansion of that and how you've been able to grow the investment side of things and what other businesses you're involved in.
Sure. Well, speaking of getting your hands dirty,
yes.
The next business that I started in the UK, so after I left the construction company, I actually went to work for a lawyer, and that's where I got into the consulting business, and I learned a lot from there. And actually that was one of my mentors, still is one of my mentors till today. And he really taught me to really figure out the crux of any issue and how to really analyze it and how to really break it down. And he threw me in the deep end quite a few times, and that was a really good learning experience as well. I then went out, I decided I need to go out and start my own business, This was still, I'd been working for people for a few years. I decided I need to start my own business, and I got into one of my first business really, which was
At what age?
21.
Okay.
21, 22. 21.
So quite early on.
Quite early on. Yeah, I was always, itching to get started. So I left with what was quite a good job and decided to go work and set up my first media company, which is a company called Generon Media, which I set up with my brother-in-law in London. And the idea was very simple. Now it's quite a popular thing. It was putting screens into retail outlets,
yes,
and advertising, etc., etc. And so well, first we had no money at the time. So we went and so all the advice we got, we were told, you've got to buy commercial this and all sort of really expensive equipment. And we said, well, we don't have any of that kind of money. So we'll just go buy a screen from PC World in London, buy a really cheap USB stick and upload the stuff. And we'll do everything manually. And so at the time I said, we'll hire someone to install the screens. And my older brother came to me and said, he sort of told me off a little bit and gave me some advice and said, if you want to be able to grow a business, you can't be the CEO from day one. You have to do all the dirty work yourself from the beginning, from the get-go. So you need to be there at 2 o'clock in the morning installing these screens, not someone else, because otherwise when it, please God, grows, you're not going to have any understanding of how that works. And fast forward a couple of years later, here in Gibraltar, we set up a company called Brenig Media. And we ended up with a contract with Eroski with 150 plus screens across 60 of their stores. And we had an installation company doing a lot of work for us. And they came to me with a number of problems, which are very often fabricated problems also, but they're certainly, or just they haven't worked out a good solution for them. But because I actually had that experience myself at 2 a.m. installing stuff, so I was able to come up with solutions which were much, much cheaper than they were proposing. And we saved a lot of money. Unfortunately, COVID took out that business because unfortunately in 2020, when supermarkets were unfortunately not very full, then you can't really advertise it on screens over there. So we that was the end of that one.
Well, but I think that, you could also safely say that problems and issues and failures, as they say, are part and parcel of the process of maturing and growing in business.
Absolutely. I mean, we were just talking earlier, and I think failures is really something which makes an entrepreneur. I think it's quite easy to be successful in the sense where things can sometimes all just go right, but I don't think you learn very much from that. I think all that I've really learned and any value that I really bring, and this is what I bring into my consulting practice very often, is the mistakes that I've made. And it's looking, and it switched it took me a while, but eventually I sort of switched my perspective to, instead of looking at the upside, which usually young entrepreneurs get very excited about, all the things that can go right. And really what can go right is a little bit irrelevant, meaning if it goes well, no one's complaining. Your investors are happy, everyone's happy, it's great. The problem is when things go wrong. And so you have to you don't prepare for things to go right, you have to prepare for things to go wrong. And so that's when backup plans come into place, insurance policies, all these kinds of things are really to prevent things going wrong. And so when you've made enough mistakes, which I have, then you're able to then learn from that and say, okay, well, we're not going to do this because this is possibly what will go wrong. And so you're able to actually forge a path through, which makes more sense and works better because of those mistakes. I'm actually really proud of the mistakes that I made. In fact, at the moment, I don't have an office here in Gibraltar. I work from home, but we had an office here till not long ago, and I had a big blackboard on one wall of the office, and we used to call it the graveyard, which is because we put every project, and I've been involved in quite a few companies and projects, we put everything on the blackboards. And then the ones that were failures, which were quite a few, because we, a lot of it is also just fading fast as well. It's just trying to get in. If it doesn't work, that's fine, move on to something else, right? Don't invest too heavily in something which might just be a bit of a gamble. And we had all the ideas then. A lot of people ask me, like, why are you highlighting your failures? I said, because those contribute to the successes as well. So it's not, you can't have one without the other.
I don't think any business is sustainable without a learning process in between. And that means making mistakes. I think that's true for any career also. But one of the things that I'm really interested in getting from you is, because you're kind of like sitting in between Gibraltar, London, and other countries as well, where you're invested and you've had businesses. I'd like to know, how important do you think it is to have entrepreneurship and the whole ecosystem in Gibraltar thriving to sort of encourage and motivate people to build businesses from Gibraltar?
So, I mean, I've always been entrepreneurial, and I really think it's a crucial part of the economy for the simple reason that you can have established businesses which are great, and you can have sort of lifetime careers in these businesses. And then things like Brexit or COVID or the treaty or all kinds of things which throw things for a loop. And unless you have that entrepreneurial spirit of, instead of looking at what's going wrong, is what are the new opportunities, right? Right now, for example, everyone's concerned about the treaty, right? That's it's a big topic on everyone's mind. And I get it. If you've been in business for a long time, it's something you're very concerned about. Things have been working a certain way. I have interest in businesses here in Gibraltar, which are likely going to fail because of the treaty. But at the same time, there's also new opportunities. We're opening into a new market. There's a lot of different things. Yes, we have to work out what those are. Yes, we have to. So I'm much more excited about the opportunities of the treaty than I'm worried about the failures that will inevitably, they will happen. There will be things which will suffer any change. But that's going to happen regardless of whether there's a treaty or there's something else.
Yeah.
You can't control the way the world works. There's always going to be something that changes that dynamic. COVID was a really powerful one, which no one could see coming.
Yep.
So if you have that entrepreneurial mindset, and if you have a base of entrepreneurs in any given country, that's going to be strong. That's what's going to give it real value.
I wanted to touch upon the fact that we've talked a bit about Gibraltar's community, but I also wanted to talk about the Jewish community more specifically, and the religion. Do you think that the values that you get sort of taught from a very young age and the community itself is something that has helped you in your business career?
So I think it's certainly true that the Jewish community is very focused on things like education and entrepreneurship in general. And that's true not just in Gibraltar, but worldwide.
Yes.
You'll find a lot of Jewish entrepreneurs worldwide. I think it's also, so for me personally, a big part of it is most of my mentors have been Jewish, a lot of my clients are Jewish, and these are all very, in most cases, people I really look up to. Not just because they're successful entrepreneurs,
Yes.
but because the way that they're successful is very much based on how many other people they can make successful as well. And I think that's an incredible value. And I think the way that they deal in business, the honesty that they deal in business, I think is such a powerful thing. You know, my rabbi always reminds me that we're sort of, you know, our tradition that we're brought down, there's a number of questions you're asked when a person passes away and they go to, hopefully heaven, they're asked a certain number of questions. The very first question they're asked, according to our tradition, is,
Yes.
were you honest in business? It's not, did you study this? It's not, did you keep these laws? It's, were you honest in business? Because I think it's such a crucial thing for us. And then, you know, our charity laws as well, we're so geared towards being successful for other people, not just for ourselves.
Yes.
And so most of the entrepreneurs and mentors that I have, that I work with, are people who are, really money is not the main thing for them, and the success in business is more of a game, because a lot of these people are very, very successful. They don't need more money.
Yes.
What it's about for them is very much, if I can get bigger, what more can I do? That's what it is. So I really appreciate that value. I think a lot of, and it's not an exclusively Jewish thing, but I happen to see it so much with my clients and mentors. I just think it's such a powerful value. And it's something that I learned from home, I learned from my community, and I learned from my mentors. And I just think it's something which we need more of as well. I think, you know, it's something which is very powerful.
I mean, in Gibraltar, we're very lucky because we coexist with such great relationships between all the different religions. And I felt it was important to share that perspective as well, especially because this is a program that's geared towards trying to get as many perspectives in business as possible. So now we're going to talk about your book and the fact that you penned a book. Tell me, why did you think it was necessary for you to actually write your own book?
I've always been an avid reader since I was very little, but so it's something that I'm very passionate about in general, is books. But also with my kids, so I have a rule in my house that any book that they want to buy, they're allowed to buy. Like
Amazing.
That's open door policy when it comes to books. Buy as many books you want. Try and read them if you can, not just decorate your shelves. But so my kids tend to go for more, you know, football books or this, but whatever it is. And I introduced my oldest son, who's 12, to the book by Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, because for me it was a really foundational book. It was a complete game changer. It changed my life completely. And so I was trying to introduce him to some of the books that changed my life, right? And so I gave him the book, and he's struggling to read through it because it's really not written for 12-year-olds. It's not even written for this generation. It's written for a previous generation. The language is a little bit stiff. You know, it's a bit tougher. And so I was sort of, you know, battling back and forward with that. And then I came across this book, which my book is actually based on, which is called The Richest Man in Babylon by George Clason, which I read it and I was blown away. It's a short book, but the foundational elements and rules in that book are so incredibly necessary.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing new. These are all things, you know, Warren Buffett will say the same thing. There's a lot of, it's very repetitive, but it's because it's so true. But what struck me is that these are so absolutely true, but at the same time, they're really not taught. So people sort of know these things instinctively perhaps, but they're not sort of drummed into us. And so I wanted to give that book to my kids, but it's really written in a sort of ye old English style, which I almost struggled to read. There was no chance they were going to read it. So I rewrote that book initially as a kid's book, and that's what came out here. But actually, I've given it to so many people, and so many people have read it now. the response I've got back, well, my first response I got back was, why is this a kid's book? This is for everybody.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, well, okay, fair. I mean, I wrote it for my kids. That's why it's a kid's book, but you're right. It's really not. It's for young adults, I guess, or older adults as well. And then I've had really good feedback from bankers, lawyers, all sorts of people across all sorts of professions, investment professionals. And they're saying, like, we know this stuff instinctively.
Yeah.
But when you put it in the book and it's written in a story format, so it's really easy to read.
Yes.
It's a game changer.
Would you say that it's essential to be able to understand money from a very young age?
I think one of the failings of the school system worldwide is that we're not actually taught financial literacy. It's something that I'm pushing to try and change as much as possible. But we're really not taught it. I mean, we're taught lots of things. I always, find it somewhat comical that home economics in school is actually cooking. It's not nothing to do with economics. You sort of graduate from school, you go to work life, and you suddenly have to rent. You've got mortgages, you've got even rental employment contracts, and you have no idea what you're doing. And so some people are lucky enough that they've got mentors and advisors or parents who will help them with those things. Some people are just out there on their own in the world and swimming, and there's really nothing for them. And so that's one of the things what I love about books, is that you have access today, is particularly to knowledge about absolutely every subject.
Yeah.
But I think it's incredibly important for us, particularly for young people. Some of the stuff here, if you look at some of the I give some examples at the back, which just sort of show. One of the examples I gave, and it's based on sort of UK numbers because I was trying to reach a wider audience, but more or less the same here for Gibraltar. Essentially, someone on minimum wage, if they're on minimum wage their whole life, which is usually unrealistic, usually people tend to grow, but even if they're on minimum wage their entire life, they can retire with £1 million in the bank, right? And that's based off of just really simple, proven principles. There's nothing new here.
Yeah.
There's nothing sort of innovative. It's just really just demonstrating that if you keep to certain disciplined processes, and this is also not investing all your money, it's taking 10% aside, investing that on a weekly, monthly basis, and over time that will grow incredibly powerful. And the compounding, which again, people aren't taught compounding.
Yes.
What actually, one of the conversations that sparked this book really was I was talking with my three oldest, right, who are now 9, 10, and 12 respectively.
Right.
And I was trying to explain to them compounding, which is a fun principle to explain to little kids.
Yes.
Because they get an allowance, right? I said, okay, well, what if you invested, for argument's sake, £10 a week into the S&P 500 and it compounded at roughly 12% a year, right? What do you think that would add up to over 20 years?
Yes.
Right? That you're 10 years old now. If you did that from now till you're 30, what do you think that would add up to? And they sort of threw out, £800 or whatever. Yeah. And they were like, I was like, well, do the maths. And so they did the maths and they go, okay, well, just if it's only £10 a week and without any interest, because they don't know how that works, it would be roughly £10,000 over 20 years, right? It's £500 a year, 52 weeks a year, £500 a year, £10,000 roughly. I said, okay, now let's put that into ChatGPT and ask it what happens if you compound at 12%. But before you do that, what do you think it'll go to? And they go, well, it'll probably go to £15,000, right? And so I said, well, that's pretty good, right? £10 a week turns into £15,000, pretty good. They run the numbers and it works out to something like £37,000.
Okay.
Which to a 12-year-old is basically, you may as well tell them it's £1 million, right?
Yes, exactly.
So £10, which becomes, a couple of sweets, to that sort of number was staggering to them. And so they immediately, all of them said to me, don't give us any allowance anymore. Can you please just invest it for us? So we did that. And I think those sorts of things which people don't necessarily, maybe they know, but they don't actually, it's not in their face. They don't really know it properly. And they're not forced to confront it, I think is incredibly powerful. And so that's really the goal of the book, is to try and get that out as much as possible and try and really, have people learn that at a young age as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that there are things in the system that nowadays are not what we need. So I'm very interested in reading this myself also, because obviously, even at a later stage, I think it's important to understand what...
Yeah, I mean, there's stuff in there which, again, it's funny because it's sort of my own advice. It's not really my advice, but it's advice that I knew about and I just was trying to put together in one book. But there's a lot of stuff that I wasn't doing.
Of course.
And so as I started the process of writing the book, I started like, well, why am I not doing that? That's ridiculous. And I started doing that, and it's been fundamentally different for me as well, which has been really powerful, which again really proves the point that it's not that the knowledge is there, it's that you have to be internalizing it. So my 8-year-old has read it. His class, the Hebrew primary school asked me to come and give a little class on it. And I donated some to the Hebrew primary school, and I think year 5 and 6 have all read it.
Amazing.
And some of them, one of the parents contacted me recently that her son is on his third time reading it now.
Wow.
And he really likes it. And it's really cute. I engage a lot of times with these kids and they ask me these questions, and I think it's fantastic. So.
And they're your hardest critics, right? Because they'll tell you the truth.
They will tell you bluntly the truth. They'll call you out on anything. I just think it's something that maybe the Department of Education needs to engage with, not necessarily my book specifically, but just this idea of bringing financial literacy to younger kids, particularly to teenagers, where they can really understand business. I love this. They've got the Young Enterprise thing that they do every year, which I think is incredible. I love these sorts of things because they're really opening the eyes of these kids. Number one, not everybody's cut out to be an employee.
Yes.
Right? I mean, a lot of people say not everyone's cut out to be an entrepreneur. That's true, but also not everyone's cut out to not be an entrepreneur.
Yes.
Some people need that. Some people need that way in life. So I think it's just showing that there's so much out there and there's so many opportunities. But for example, today with AI, I mean, I remember 15 years ago, I had to sort of select between a number of business ideas that I had, because most of them were very much heavy software oriented, which at the time I remember getting quotes, it was like 80 to 100,000 pounds, really expensive. And that's before you can even test to see if it works, right? You can't get investors on board until you've proven all these things. Today with a £20 subscription to ChatGPT, you can basically build anything. You can get a website up and running in minutes, costs you very little. You know, for 20, 30 pounds today, you can really build an entire business. And you don't need 17 people on board. You can have 1 or 2 people.
Yes.
Right. So it's really changed what's possible out there. And so that may be that there's also lots of other people doing and you're competing with more people perhaps. But I think there's so many opportunities for young people particularly, to get involved in businesses really early, really cheaply.
So on that note, one of the things that I do want to do is pick your brain a little bit and have a think about or a conversation about, what do you think are the treaty opportunities? Like, have you been able to identify anything within what you've seen already, which I know at this stage is quite difficult because we need to see how it all plays out in the first place. But is there any niches that you kind of identified that you think will play a big part in the opportunities as people talk about the shared prosperity, the opening of the European market to Gibraltar? What do you think is there already?
The opportunities to sell to the European market. Now, Gibraltar is never going to be a manufacturing hub for anything, right? We have space constraints. What we've always done very well is financial services, for example. I think one of the big opportunities, and I've said this for 10 years, I don't think it's new because of the treaty, but I think it's now grown bigger because of the treaty, is we have the opportunity here to test things very rapidly, right? There's very few places in the world where you have access to the CEOs of banks, heads of major law firms, government ministers, heads of hospitals, you know, mostly from 1 or 2 phone calls. It's you know one guy and then he can introduce you to a few people and they'll very happily introduce you to others. Yeah. And so there's very few places in the world where you have that high level access. So I don't think it's so much what Europe is offering us, I think it's what we can offer Europe. Okay. Right, I think we have something really powerful. It's really expensive normally to build something like that, right? If you're in Europe and you want to test something, you've got to build something really solid before you can even get your foot in the door at a big law firm. You can very comfortably have a cup of coffee with somebody at a very high level who will test that idea or give you some feedback on that.
But essentially, are already accessibility, efficiency becoming even greater is the basic, I think.
In theory, again, we have to see what that actually looks like. I don't know how much, you know, we really have to see how easy it will be to sell to Europe. We don't really know a lot of these things. And I don't think anyone really knows the answers yet. I think we'll have to see in probably a couple of months, maybe a couple of years. Yeah,
definitely. So there is a question we ask all of our guests to sort of close up the program. James Brenig right now is?
Grateful.
Grateful.
So I think gratitude, I think, is something for me which I'm learning to do more often now. It's grateful to God for giving me so many opportunities. Gratitude to my wife for helping me along this journey, to my kids for teaching me so much, to my community, to the wider community for all these opportunities. I think that's the theme that I'm working on at the moment. I've changed a lot the way I do business. I used to be much more aggressive in terms of starting things and, you know, rapidly starting businesses, which is why I've accumulated so many businesses and interests, you know, many of which have failed, which is fine. I'm very happy with that. But I think I've taken a slightly slower pace, more deliberate pace, more partnership focused as well. So I'm very keen now on working with other people as opposed to sort of retaining everything for myself. I'm much more interested in building things with other people, which number one gives it a better chance of success, but also allows me to sort of dip my toe in and stay in that business for only a short amount of time rather than giving it my full focus.
Yeah.
So I can actually spend more time with my family. I can give more attention to more things rather than just being focused on one business. So at the same time as I'm consolidating and focusing, I'm also allowing myself, by partnering with as many people as possible, to actually grow and grow that way. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining me and for sharing so much about yourself also, James. It was really, really incredible.
Well, thank you so much, Denise, for having me. Always a pleasure talking to you. And I know you've been in this space for many years, and I look forward to seeing what's next.
From financial literacy to all types of entrepreneurship, a young family man, and also talking about religion, this was a conversation I truly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching.